Hello, it's been a while since I posted anything new, but the other day I watched The Bride, and I've got issues. There are spoilers ahead.
Was I just the same before the accident?
It's 1930 Chicago, where Frankenstein's monster, also called Frankenstein, is seeking out a doctor experienced in reanimation to revive a murdered woman who will be his wife. And then beautiful chaos ensues as they embark on their weird, problematic and destructive relationship. Think Bonnie and Clyde or Mickey and Mallory Knox and you won't be too far off. This film is absolutely excellent. From the first few minutes I was intrigued and engaged. The story, the dialogue, the costumes and makeup, the storytelling techniques, the editing. You can see the influences from literature and films that have come before, yet it feels original and exciting. I honestly loved every element of it. Throughout the film I kept thinking, this got an 8. This definitely got at least an 8 out of 10. I'm giving it at least a high 8 and could easily be swayed to give it a 9. So imagine my horror when I checked IMDb and see 5.7 and then a mirrored 57% from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience give it 69%, so okay, that reassures me somewhat that I'm not just being completely oblivious and misguided in my feelings. But I felt genuinely stunned, and then reading through some of the reviews honestly made me feel like I'm living in a completely different reality. The film starts with author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, played by Jessie Buckley in a liminal space, who introduces us to the story and gives us some necessary context and setup. Her monologue in this opening sequence is the sort of thing you would typically get as a voiceover or narration in other films, but having her on screen and giving the voice a face, it helps the sequence to be more engaging and dramatic as we're getting the facial expressions and mannerisms of the character. Some films start with a voiceover and yes, they're a bit overt and it's the literal opposite of show don't tell, but sometimes it is necessary, and I feel like it was handled in the best and most effective way possible here. I'm pretty sure the reason that this opening connected with me so much is that it reminds me of Bronson, and I love that film.
I'm gonna show you the ultimate in unfair takedowns.
The moments where Tom Hardy is giving us those surreal and theatrical monologues and performances. It's that kind of realm between reality and fantasy. It illustrates ideas, feelings and concepts that are difficult to convey through typical linear storytelling. And if executed well, they have the potential to be really effective. Mary seems to exist within the mind of Ida, also played by Jessie Buckley. She's the woman who gets murdered and reanimated and becomes Frankenstein's bride, and the Mary Shelley character continues to feature throughout as we jump between the real and the surreal. We're introduced to Ida in a rambunctious bar environment where she and other women have been hired by the Chicago mob to satisfy their desires. We also eventually discover that the police were using these women as part of a sting operation to take down the mob. The editing and sound design in this sequence lets us know that Ida is becoming increasingly more agitated with her company. They're disrespectful, controlling, threatening, and just generally hideous to be around. And here is where Mary Shelley takes hold of Ida, and we've got a bit of a split personality / possession thing happening for the rest of the film, where Mary manifests through Ida. Absolutely outstanding work with this from Jessie Buckley, having to act as two people at once and understanding how they interact with one another, what their differences and similarities are, must be a huge challenge as an actor, and she is phenomenal. So much of the film's success in capturing its audience is down to her, and that's a huge amount of responsibility on your shoulders when you're at work. I found her performance outstanding, and in a film that stars Christian Bale, my favourite actor of all time, I actually think her performance and her character are the strongest elements of the film. We've got really great performances here from the mob guys as well. John Magaro, Matthew Mayer, Zlatko Burick, all excellent with the short amount of screen time that they have. So Ida ends up getting killed and her body dumped in a grave by the mob. She's murdered by being pushed down the stairs, and the scene of this is gruesome. The way her body falls, her head smashing against the steps, her bones breaking and snapping with the force. It made my stomach turn, and it was such a brilliant sequence of horror. Excellent camera work, sound design, and use of shadow, and we see these things throughout. These aspects of filmmaking are used and executed so well through the whole film and just fully dragged me into the world. And I'm just going to stop here and reflect on something. So some of the reviews that I've seen, many of them describe Ida as accidentally falling down the stairs. This one review even describes Ida as a gangster's talkative girlfriend, and I'm like, sorry, talkative girlfriend? I mean, I know art is open to interpretation, but that is an absolutely wild thing to think, that Ida is the mob's girlfriend and that she accidentally fell down the stairs. We're then introduced to Frankenstein, who also gets called Frank and also gets called Frankie. He's looking for Dr. Euphronius. His loneliness over the decades he finds unbearable, and he has been seeking the doctor out to make a bride for him. Frankie is beyond desperate for connection, for love, even just to touch someone. Dr. Euphronius, played by Annette Bening, is almost giddy at the fact that Frankie has sought her out and that she gets to meet him. She teeters into the realm of mad scientist without becoming fully bonkers and unrelatable, and Bening captures the essence of the character brilliantly. I found all the performances to be exquisite, really. Everyone has done such a phenomenal job under the direction of Maggie Gyllenhaal. One of Frankie's character traits is that he loves the movies, specifically the movies of Ronnie Reed, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, if you've seen or heard some of my previous reviews, you'll know that I love seeing films, TV shows, songs, plays, whatever it might be, that have been created especially for the world that we're watching. I love The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon in Murderbot, Angels with Filthy Souls in Home Alone is iconic, and here in The Bride we get the films of Ronnie Reed. And within these sequences where Frankie is watching them, he'll sometimes imagine himself in the film, and here we get an idea of the fantasy he dreams of his life being, and I just love it. It's also a brilliant way of adding humanity and life to Frankie. He gets real enjoyment out of watching the films, and it's pretty funny to see him in a normal setting like a cinema, given his monstrous appearance. He's not there to scare or hurt anyone, he just loves the films. And this whole thing is made even more effective by the fact that it works and makes sense within the narrative. It's believable that a chronically lonely person would become obsessed with specific characters or actors from films and form these parasocial relationships with them. And then Frankie actually gets to meet Ronnie later in the film, and it's so awkward because he speaks to him like they know each other. It's really nicely done and really funny. When they reanimate Ida, the mise-en-scène, all the machinery and gadgets and the whirring noises of the equipment is brilliant and atmospheric. Just exactly the sort of thing you'd expect to see in a Frankenstein story, but still with that feeling of originality. Ida reanimated looks amazing. I am absolutely obsessed with the way they've designed the bride. The big electrified hair, her disheveled clothing, the tones of her skin and scars and the damage on her body. And my favourite thing is that as she comes back to life and takes her first breath, she coughs up this awful thick black liquid that stains her lips and the side of her mouth and parts of her hands as well, which means it's there for the rest of the film. And I loved this addition to her look. Not only does it look artistic and completes her image, but it also marks her as something otherworldly and supernatural, something almost human but not quite, and the overall effect of her appearance is dramatic and clearly meticulously designed. The bride has no memory from when she was alive, so Frankie comes up with a backstory about them and their relationship, deceiving her. The dialogue between the bride and Frankie, and then between the bride and Dr. Euphronius, is so well written. It's really clever, unexpected, witty. Societal attitudes towards women are explored and examined, but it never felt like it was doing it in a preachy way, and it never unnecessarily dominated the story or felt unnecessary to the story, in my opinion. We weave in and out of it with the narrative, and I feel like it works absolutely fine. The feminist aspects of the film are something that's getting a lot of criticism. A reviewer for Blunt said it's too eager to bash us over the head with its gender politics. One from Shade Studios said it feels forced. The rhetoric around this, and something I feel like I see a lot when films are exploring complex societal messages, usually around sexism and abuse, is that they're not doing it right, or they're doing too much, as if there is one set way with strict rules that you're meant to interpret these sorts of themes. And for me, that demonstrates a real ignorance of how these issues affect the individual. I remember when we did Natural Born Killers on Just Films and that, and one of the criticisms was that it doesn't know the meaning of moderation or subtlety. And I just think when you're dealing with a situation that has devastating impact on an individual, like the abuse that Mallory suffers from her dad in Natural Born Killers, like the trauma that Mickey experiences in his childhood, it isn't subtle, it isn't moderate to the person going through it. And here with The Bride, you have a film that's engaging you in ideas about modern feminism in a 1930s setting, which was a flipping horrendous time for women in general anyway. And the character of the bride, for some, will personify that rage, the fear, the injustice of what has happened and what is happening to some women, and the attitudes that remain within some sections of society. But people still want it to be packaged in a certain way, in a way that that they deem acceptable and that isn't too over the top. I know it's subjective. If you don't like this sort of thing in films, that's your preference, and I get that, and I'm trying to be understanding of it. But it does frustrate me when it feels like, on one hand, there are voices claiming that we need more female directors, writers, crew members, but then on the other hand, they're being told, oh no, don't do it like that. Don't hit us over the head with it. Nothing about this film is subtle. It's a great, big, chaotic monster of a film, so why should the messages and how they're delivered be subtle? You think of someone like Quentin Tarantino. Many of his films are not subtle or moderate at all, but they're still brilliant, and many people think so too. And from my point of view, it does feel like there are a lot of voices out there who demand that feminist and anti-misogynist messages shouldn't hit you over the head with what they're doing, and I don't feel like that's a fair criticism. This film is about a monster who wants to bring back to life a dead woman and marry her. I want this film to hit me over the head with everything it's got. The other main criticism of the film is that it's too chaotic and disordered. There are claims that Maggie Gyllenhaal is throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what sticks, but then nothing does. That it's an incoherent mess. Phrases like "it's all over the place" came up a lot, and all these sorts of things. And my problem with these takes is that our main character is a woman who has been brought back from the dead, who has an author who's been dead for nearly 180 years stuck in her head, and said author herself is suffering with a brain tumour and channeling her frustrations through the bride. Her only connections to the world are Frankenstein's monster and a mad scientist. We see her get assaulted both as Ida and the bride. We later find out that she's been screwed over by the police, so in my opinion, the chaos of the film is completely necessary and is true to the protagonist. She is all over the place. You could argue that she's even an unreliable narrator, so I think to regard all those points as being failings of the film is completely missing the point. And I may well be overstepping here, but if you can't see the value in this film, then maybe you're not a very good film critic. There. I said it. I'm not saying you had to enjoy it. I've seen plenty of films I didn't enjoy, but I can clearly see their place in the landscape and identify their strong qualities. But to call The Bride a bad film is just factually incorrect, in my opinion. Anyway, the rest of the film essentially follows Frankie and the bride getting up to shenanigans, some of them involving violence, with two detectives, played by Penelope Cruz and Peter Sarsgaard, on their tail. If Maggie wasn't influenced by natural-born killers, I would be really surprised. There are a lot of similarities with regards to how Frankie and the bride interact with certain people and the situations that they find themselves in or create for themselves. They bask in this shared madness, and we seem to dip in and out of reality. There's lots of dancing, lots of music, some beautifully choreographed sequences with incredible lighting and sound design. All the cinematic elements of it are spot on and executed brilliantly. It's harsh, it's gruesome. I'm actually astonished that it only got a 15 rating here in the UK and not an 18. We see their relationship develop. It's unhinged, it's problematic. I think another reason that I'm a bit miffed at how it's been received is that I watched Del Toro's Frankenstein from last year and it was so boring. Yet that gets 7.5 on IMDb, 85% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, and 94% from the audience. I'll not get into it, but I did not see anything new, original, or exciting in that film, so I just don't get it. But moving on. For me, The Bride is just one heck of a ride, and I think if you haven't seen it yet and you're curious about it, do give it a watch if you get the chance. I'm going to give this film an 8.7 out of 10, or an 87%. It's bold, it's brutal and captivating, and for me, it really shows Maggie Gyllenhaal as being an absolute master. I really hope she keeps directing if this is the sort of standard we're going to get from her. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Bride, but as always, it's so interesting to hear what you guys think, whether you loved it or hated it. It is fascinating to hear how films can have such a different impact on different members of the audience. And I'll be back soon with more thoughts on things that I've watched. Bye.